Hi everyone, and welcome to Geometry Lesson 1-1, Understanding Points, Lines, and Planes. We're going to start by talking about what undefined terms are. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have there. Undefined terms are terms which cannot be defined by using other figures. So these are the basic building blocks of geometry. There are three of them: points, lines, and planes. So let's look at what they are. A point names a location in space, and it doesn't have any size, which means it's zero-dimensional. When we draw it, we represent it by a dot, because it's impossible to draw something that has no size. So we represent it by a dot, and generally next to the dot, we're going to put a capital letter to name it. So in this case, I have point P. If I wanted to write out the name for this point, I would write the word point with a P next to it. And that P has to be the capital letter that is here. Okay, now whatever letter this is, I would change the letter here. And this may be capitalized, it may not, depending upon whether it's the beginning of a sentence or not. But that's how we would name a point. Next, let's look at a line. A line is a straight path that has no thickness and extends forever. This is one-dimensional, and that one dimension is length. The length of the line is its dimension. Now, again, we couldn't draw something that didn't have thickness, so what we do is we just draw a line with arrows at the end. Okay, now it may have points on it, it may not. Sometimes it just has a little letter over here, and those help us to name the lines. Okay, so to name a line, you can use the symbols here where I have the line symbol. Notice the arrows at the end, and you pick any 2 points on it. So line BC or line CB. Or you can just write the word line with the letters of the points, and it's always 2 points. It's never more than 2. You can also just pick the special letter that they use to define the lines. And I use the red arrow here to show that letter. It's line L. Now let's look at our last undefined term. This is a plane. It's a flat surface that has no thickness and extends forever, which means it has 2 dimensions. It has length and width. When we draw a plane, we represent it using a parallelogram. So you'll notice I've drawn a parallelogram here. I've put a few points on it just for fun, and I've also put a letter here in the corner to label it. So when I want to name this plane, I can pick any 3 what we call non-collinear points on that plane, and they can be given in any order. So in this case, I've named it as plane G, F, H. But you could have given those points in a different order and it would still work. And again, this word plane does not need to be capitalized. Now, if they give a letter in the corner like they did here, I can use that to name it, and I can call this plane K. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use these undefined terms to define 2 more terms. So let's take a look. The first term is collinear. That means on the same line. Notice the prefix co means together, and then linear is like line, so together on a line. So when we were naming a plane, we used the word non-collinear. That means not collinear, or points that are not on the same line. Okay, collinear is points that are on the same line. So points B and C are collinear. Next, we have coplanar. These are points that lie on the same plane. So coplanar would be the points F and G, because they're on the same plane. Now you can name more than 2 points, you can name just 2 points, it doesn't really matter, but because they're on the same plane, we call them coplanar. You could even have coplanar lines, and you can have other objects that are also coplanar. Let's take a look at an example next. In this example, I have 4 questions for you to answer, and you're going to use the diagram on the right to do that. The first question is, what are 2 other ways to name line QT? And line QT is this one right here. So find 2 other ways to name it. Next, you're going to find two other ways to name plane P. Plane P, here's the P, is this plane right here. So find two other ways to name it. Next, they want the name of 3 collinear points. And finally, they want you to name 4 coplanar points. So go ahead and do that, pause the video, and then press play to see if your answers are right. Okay, for line QT, I just used another point on that line, so N. So I named line QN. You can also use T to get line TN. You could switch the order of any of those. You could even write the word line next to this instead of using the line symbol. I also use this letter over here that's labeling that line, and I named it line M. Now for plane P, you can pick any 3 non-collinear points. So V has to be one of them because R, Q, and S are collinear. So you can name it RQV, like I did. You could name it SRV, or you could mix up these other letters. As long as you name V with them, you're okay. Now, the next question, they wanted 3 collinear points. I picked R, Q, and S to be collinear. You could also use points T, Q, and N as well because they are also collinear. So I just did these. You could have had the other ones, and that would be acceptable. Finally, they wanted you to name 4 coplanar points. And there are only these 4 right here on the plane. So I named points R, Q, V, and S. Okay, so now we have some more terms to talk about. We're going to be looking at parts of lines. So we're going to take a line and we're going to cut off 1 or 2 of the arrows and we're going to see what happens. The first part of a line that I would like to talk about is a segment. A segment is the part of a line consisting of 2 points, in this case A and B, and all of the points between them. Okay, so point B is here. This is an end point because it's where the segment ends. It shows you where it ends, so it's an end point. Normally the line would have an arrow going in this direction and an arrow going in that direction. This is what a line segment would look like. Now to name it, I can write out the words line segment and then name the 2 endpoints, AB or BA. Or I could use symbols. Notice this is very similar to the line symbol, but it doesn't have the arrows at the end. And again, you need to name the endpoints in any order. Let's look at the next part of a line. We have a ray next, a part of a line that starts at an endpoint and extends forever in one direction. That means that this is the end point, and then we have an arrow going in the other direction through the other point here. Now, when you name this, it's really important to note which one is the end point because you have to list that letter first. So we have ray UV, or you can use the symbol for ray. Notice it's almost like the line symbol, but there's no arrow here because that's an end point. So it's ray UV. Again, the U has to come first because that's the end point. Okay, the last part of a line that we want to talk about is opposite rays. Now, notice this almost looks exactly like a line. There are 2 rays that have a common endpoint and form a line. So basically, it's any line that has 3 points on it, and we can call this middle point as the end point. So I have ray ZX and ray ZY that form opposite rays. They're rays that point in 2 different directions. Okay, I have one more example for you. So let's take a look at what's going on there. In this example, you have 3 tasks, and you're going to use the purple picture on the right to complete them. In the first one, you need to name a line segment that contains point B. So point B is here, and you need to name the line segment that contains it. Next, you need to name a ray that has point C as an endpoint and contains point D. And finally, you need to name a pair of opposite rays. So pause the video, try and do that, and then press play to check your answers. Okay, there's only one line segment that contains point B, and that's segment BC. okay? Or you could name it CB. And yes, you could write out the names for any of these. I used the symbols. Now, for an array that has point C as an endpoint and contains point D, you're going to name it as CD. So notice I used the array symbol as CD, or you could write the word ray CD. Has to be in this order for this ray. Next, a pair of opposite rays. You have ray CD and ray CA. That's the only pair of opposite rays you could name. So that's it for this video. There's a little more we're going to talk about in class, but don't forget to write down any questions you had so you can ask them. I'll see you later.